Welcome, everyone. My name is Tina Amper. I'm from the Digital Benefits Network at the Beeck Center for Social Impact and Innovation at Georgetown University. And I'm your moderator for this session. It is my pleasure to welcome you to today's FormFest 2023 session entitled From Paper Trails to Digital Pathways, France's Form Journey. This is a 1-hour session. Our speaker will present first, and we will save the last 20 minutes for questions and answers. If you have a question during the presentation, feel free to use the chat box and we will moderate the questions out loud so the recording captures the question and answer. Let's get started. So I'll turn the session over to Paul Chavard, who will get us started by sharing their formative form story. Paul?
Hello, bonjour. My name is Paul. I'm here to talk to you about forms in the context of French administration. I'm senior software developer on the team behind the project called Démarches Simplifiées, Simplified Procedures in French. And I've been working on this project for 6 years now. This is me. This is my email. I also put it in the chat in case you want to be in contact. This is the project. I will also put the link later on. This is where it all happens. So yes, before going into motivation, I'm just going to present the project a little bit. The project is part of an incubator called betagouv.fr. The incubator, it's an incubator in French government. It selects projects proposed by French public servants. Anyone can submit a project. And if the project is selected, then the team is allocated to try to build the project. The goal is to try small, and usually like the initial allocation is very time boxed to try to prove if it can work. The aim of this incubator is to encourage a new approach to the old problem of building software for public institutions. The code we produce is open source. We start small and prove the idea works before investing in scale. The project I will be presenting, like I said, I've been working on it for 6 years, so it's grew quite a bit since then. And today it's one of the biggest projects in the incubator. Before I proceed, let me provide some information about French government, so it will be easier to follow on certain details. In France, we typically refer to the national administration, I guess similar to your federal government, and local administrations, I guess similar to your state administration. But I mean, yours, like, I know there's lots of Americans, there's also other people, I don't know how yours, but basically the idea is there is a national government and then each subsection of the country, your own government, and then we have municipalities. And despite being a relatively small country, France have a significant number of municipalities, actually approximately 35,000. To put in perspective, ChatGPT told me, and maybe it's wrong, but that United States has around 20,000 municipalities. So I think I heard somewhere that France have more municipalities than the rest of the Europe. We're really like subdivisions, and like, yeah, everyone have their own mayor. This is a bit of a context. Let's go into the motivation. I don't know if you're familiar with the term broom wagon. According to Wikipedia, it's a French invention. It is a vehicle that follows a cycling road race, sweeping up stragglers who are unable to make it to the finish line. While I don't think migration to the digital era needs to be a race, it is still a useful image. No one should be left behind. The original motivation of Démarches Simplifiées was to address the need of small administrative procedures, particularly those initiated by offices without support from dedicated IT teams. In some cases, it can be a few dozen submissions a year. Dedicated IT projects would never happen on this scale. From the start, Démarches Simplifiées.fr adopted a software as a service model. Anyone in the French administration can create an account and in a matter of minutes or hours, they can create, test, and publish a form with a built-in repository to process submissions. We targeted paper forms or fillable PDFs sent by email. This is especially like 6-7 years ago when the project started. I mean, it's still today, obviously, a huge chunk of what's happening, but it was even more so back then. Our direct users on the administration side were people who actually dealt with procedures and members of the public. This is also very important to us to try to actually, first of all, address people who are actually working with forms and not necessarily start from decision makers. Last but not least, French government is very concerned about use of sovereign technologies, especially when it comes to dealing with personal data of our citizens. We can only rely on services that are not only hosted in Europe, but also have no legal ties to any company registered outside of Europe. I guess lots of you are aware of things like Cloud Act, etc. So this was also one of the motivations that French government wanted to have their own solution that they can control. So, like I mentioned earlier, all software produced by our incubator is open source. We believe that software produced with public money should be open. Beyond the ability to reuse software, the open source approach encourages transparency. But speaking of reuse, today, apart from our own main instance, a few other instances are independently operated. We're still by far the biggest one. I will talk more about numbers later. But we're very happy to see some adoption. It does bring new challenges in terms of governance and maintainability, though. We will talk again about this later. I put in the chat the link to the GitHub project if you're interested. A few words about our team. On the technical side, we have 8 developers and 2 ops people, so like they deal with infrastructure. We have a strong DevOps culture. We own the code we produce, we own it, we deploy it, we monitor it, we fix it. We also, like all developers, I mean, actually everyone on the team does their share of customer support. So we can be in contact with direct users. As developers, we will do a bit less than people who are more dedicated to it, but it's still important for us. So we have, like, we also have 3 people who are more dedicated to administration relations. They also do more substantial part of the support. We have 1 UX designer, and the person who originally initiated the project is still with us. And nowadays he's mostly involved in strategy and political liaison with administration. As you can see, there is no dedicated product owners or project managers. We all share product ownership together. This means we decide collaboratively on the roadmap, and then more granular task ownership is taken by team members on the daily basis. Okay, let's talk a bit about history. The initiative started more than 6 years ago. The project became a significant player around 2018. The outreach team was significantly expanded. Back then, we had about 5 people doing outreach to different administrations, and the numbers of submissions skyrocketed. The project gained visibility and was presented at a press conference by Ministry of Digital Transformation. So this was kind of before that, it was really like very, very invisible. And from 2018, we were. So since 2018, the project usage has steadily grown. We also have shipped a number of features. By the end of 2018, we implemented For example, by the end of 2018, we implemented the ability to fill repeating sections in submissions, such as arbitrary number of family members, for example. It's one of the first big additions. And in 2019, we added the ability to route submissions to different teams for processing based on some selection in a form. And this year, so many years later, we have expanded this feature to allow routing submissions based on complex rules against an arbitrary numbers of fields in the form. Since the beginning of the project, we had a simple API for accessing submitted data. In 2019, we released the new API. It was, we called it version 2, based on the GraphQL specification. And we started adding Write API, which I'll talk about more about API later. In 2020, we made the biggest change to the platform since inception. In the initial version of our product, once form was published, it was frozen. One couldn't change the schema or fields anymore. The only way to change it was to clone it and publish it again. We discussed the ability to simply update the form in place, but we quickly realized that it would present a number of issues we were not comfortable with. It seemed obvious that if the person filling out the form answered a question, we couldn't change the question later. However, we also noticed that while the clone and republish for preserved flow preserved the integrity of existing submissions, it was becoming harder for administrators to manage multiple versions of the same form, each with its own submission repository. We decided we needed to preserve the form schema for existing submission while being able to display all versions of submission in the same repository. As a result, we developed a system of form versions that allows submissions created on different form schemas to coexist in the same workplace. Later, we made many improvements to the system, such as giving administrators the ability to ask submitters to revise the existing submissions under the new form version. For more technical people in the audience, think Git branching model, but for form schemas. In 2021, we improved the submission review system to give administration more control over who can be asked for reviews. I will go into more detail about each of those features. This is like a quick overview of the history. In 2022, the second biggest change arrived. We implemented the most requested feature since the inceptions, field with conditional logic. It means fields that are shown only if the fields correspond to some custom defined rules. It allowed us to target much more complex use cases. I will talk later about some of our success stories, but some of them were directly enabled by this change. I mentioned earlier that this year we improved the submission routing system. We were able to do it by reusing the same conditional logic engine we developed for conditional fields. Alongside the new features, we had to support the consistent growing usage of the platform and deal with few scaling challenges, like dealing with the always growing size of data exports. Also, a few years ago, the French administration started working on an official design system, and we migrated the platform to use it. One of the benefits was big improvement in accessibility. Let's talk about numbers. Today, the Marche Simplifiée has more than 30,000 active in development or either active or in development administrative forms. There have been 10 million submissions since the inception of the platform. We actually passed the 10 million mark like yesterday, I think. The current submission rate is about 10,000 per day. This rapid growth prompted us to consider data expirations policies early on. We now have an expiration system in place to ensure that all data in our platform is transient and not kept longer than necessary for a given procedure. I will discuss these challenges later. Okay, let's talk about success stories. I'm going to talk about 3 of them. The first one is the Minister of Culture. They migrated the vast majority of the online form to our platform in the past couple of years. Today, they operate about 500 forms with various usage rates. It can range from a dozen to dozens of thousands submissions a year. So very, very different. I talked earlier about conditional fields. It was one of the features that really allowed them to go full ahead with the transition from custom built forms to a unified platform. Spending less time building forms also enabled them to focus on producing excellent documentation and information portals for the procedures they operate. They did an outstanding job rethinking the whole publishing and communication pipeline. Another success story is the new government program FormFest, Greenfield Funds can be translated. It is a program designed to assist in financing investment in infrastructure related to environmental policy improvements by local governments and municipalities. While the forms created by Ministry of Culture target a range of different demographics, including members of the public, NGOs, artists, and cultural institutions, the target audience for green funds is local governments. Those forms are quite extensive, often comprising over 200 fields. They also incorporate advanced conditional logic and submission routing. Moreover, they are highly data-driven, with the team of data scientists building custom dashboards using our API. So this is an example of quite involved team that did lots of custom work around our API and around our platform. And finally, I would like to talk about more ephemeral forms. Some administration come to us with emergency needs based on software service model on our platform. We're able to accommodate them in a matter of days or weeks, something they are unable to do with the usual custom built forms approach. Some examples of such events were the COVID pandemic or the influx of Ukrainian refugees in Europe. In both of those cases, we had some admission coming to us, and 2 days later they were we actually had record peaks of usage. Like I said, we usually do about 10,000 records a day, submissions a day, and in one of those occurrences of emergency forms, we went from one day to another to, I think, 50,000 a day or something. So it was quite a massive spike, but it was very ephemeral also. Okay, challenges. We all love success stories, but any success story is built on challenges. I will talk for a bit about a few main ones we identified today. Like I mentioned earlier, being a self-service platform has big advantages. A person in administration can go from expressing a need to having a working form and start processing submissions in record time. But as we know, with great power comes great responsibility. People creating forms on our platform come from very different backgrounds. Some have experience with design or content creation and copywriting. However, others may have very little experience. As a result, there is significant variance in terms of the quality of form produced on the platform. One way of address this problem is through more training. Some administrations are already doing it. However, in other cases, we are back to square one, meaning we deal with small administrations that have limited resources and time to invest in form production. We try to provide as much support as we can, but as you can imagine, providing personalized help doesn't scale very well. What we're left with is trying to improve our platform to kind of try to put people on the right path of success. But as you going to see other challenges, there are other problems with that. The next challenge is somehow related. On the opposite side of the spectrum, we have people coming in with well-defined projects and experienced designers on their team. They will always ask for more powerful features, and in most cases, they will know how to handle the complexity that comes with them. But finding the right balance between both demographics is a lot of work. This is one of the things that we realize a lot. Every time something powerful is added, it will be lost to some other people, and those choices are never easy. I said that the growth of the platform is quite steady. You've seen the graphs. With more data coming in, we also have more people, very rightfully so, asking questions about security. We had to adapt the platform to have first-class support for configurable data retention policies. But beyond that, there is always a question of how big is too big. At what point do we stop putting all the eggs in the same basket? Operating one big instance allows us to stay very agile. We can deploy several times a day if needed. Operating multiple instances under several teams with split responsibility is a whole new world. So like I mentioned earlier, like we do have a few people who run their own servers with our software on it. It does create a lot of challenges in terms of packaging, how we ship new versions, how they upgrade to new versions. They're not always able to do it in a timely manner. Then it creates more problems. Sometimes they will add their own because it's open source, so they can do their own changes. Sometimes it can be hard to sync back. So this is still a very much open question, how we go forward. And finally, the challenge I want to talk about is digital inequalities. The French government, like many other governments, is very committed to pushing into the new digital age. The question that arises, how do we do that without leaving behind people who can't or don't want to move into this new world? The net zero estimate is usually considered to be around 20% of the French population that have some issues with the old digital approach to administration. So it's not a small number, like it's very significant. This is not a problem we can code ourselves out of. In France, we have initiatives like Maison France Service, which can be literally translated as House of French Service. Those are centers where anyone can come to seek help with administrative services. It is a very important tool, but there are probably not enough of those centers. One thing we can do and are doing is code into our platform first-class support to declare that the form is being filled on behalf of someone else. Obviously, it doesn't solve everything, but those are a small thing we can do. Before I jump into the demo, I will give a brief overview of what one can do with the platform. I already talked a bit about some of the features, but I will dive a bit more into that. So the first part, like the form builder, is the entry point to the platform, because from the start, we wanted to serve first and foremost individuals in side administrations. We decided to center everything on the platform around the form instead of a team or organization. Each form can have several teams attached, and this is how we do submission routing. However, each form manages its own teams. It's a trade-off that paid off so far. It means that that each form can have its own set of people who can manage it. It's very important to us to not attach them to the more formal hierarchy, because this is obviously happening much more now that we grew, but especially in the beginning, at first, it was very important that an individual inside administration could make the decision to use our tool and not go ask 3 people for permission, and they would deal with the permission later. A form can contain fields with simple types like text, numbers, dates, but also some things that would not be available in a more generic form builder, like access to government APIs. We can fill in rich information about a company or an NGO from a national registration number. We also integrate with location services like national address database or list of municipalities. Forms can also have a repeating section, as I mentioned earlier, and of course, file attachments and even geographic maps. Each form is also attached to a secondary form for administration use. It is often used to model submission processing with annotations and verification steps. Finally, the visibility of all fields can be controlled by conditional logic. Well, I mentioned that before. So yeah, this is review. So once we have a form and we published it, we can start having submissions. Submissions can be filled in by members of the public, companies, NGO institutions, and other administrations. One common case, for example, is procedures published by national administrations to the attention of local government and municipalities. Currently, we require a login, usually through the French government single sign-on called France Connect, because our main target is procedures that require some level of communication between the submitter and the administration owning the form. It allows us to create submission drafts that can be iterated on before submitting or shared in order to make a collaborative submission. Once a form is submitted, it will be proceeded directly on our platform. The person filling the form will receive direct feedback on the submission through the internal messaging system and will be notified if the request is accepted or rejected. Several round trips can happen between administration and the person filling the form before a decision is made. The history of decision will be preserved in the user's dashboard for the duration of the data retention policy. All the associated documents will also be available right there. If the procedure is recurring, the user has the ability to quickly clone and resubmit submission with few necessary adjustments. Then we have review system. Members of administration in charge of processing submissions may need to involve external reviewers in the decision-making process. External reviewers are experts, and experts can be directly invited from the platform to provide an input on a given submission. The administration publishing the form can restrict the list of experts and can be invited to a pre-approved list, or agents can make their own decisions. We also have a document builder. Processing submissions over result in the need to produce some sort of attestation or acknowledgement of receipt. We will generate a document, a notification for every milestone of the submission. Additionally, in the final decision is positive, we also generate an attestation. All of the documents and notifications can be customized based on the values submitted in the form and entered in the private annotations. We're also currently working to allow even more level of customization based on conditional fields or submission routing. And finally, we have an API. All the submission data is accessible through the GraphQL API to administrators owning the form. The API provides read access to submissions, form metadata, including the form's change history, reviews, and the history of message exchange with the submitter. The main use of this API is to back up and archive submissions data to administration-owned IT systems. There is also a mutation API that can be used to automate submission processing, implement alternative processing flows, integrate with specific administration IT systems, or support custom submission routing. Okay, and all that being said, we're going to try to make a demo. So this is our platform. We have a bit of English translation, but it's very much not complete, especially not the administration side. We made a bit more effort on the user side, on the side of the submitting the form, because this is where we do have some time. For example, we have some forms that can target tourists, etc. But on the form builder side, it's mostly only French. I'm going to create a new form with a description. To create a form, we have to say for how long it's going to be. Though I talked about data retention policies, so you have to specify for how long the data will preserve. I'm going to put 6 months, for example. And I have to say what's the legal basis for the form I'm creating. I'm just going to put the website for the French legal documents for this example. And I'm going to create a form. Now I can start adding fields. I'm going to create a title. I'm going to add a municipality selector, so I can say in what city I live. I'm gonna ask for civil status, for example, just to have an example of something with multiple values. So this one can have several values. Let's put some basic ones. Obviously, you might want more than that, but let's start with that. And then I'm gonna add a field that I will. I'm gonna ask for the list of members of the household, but I'm only gonna ask for that if it's probably a very bad example, but I'm gonna ask for it only if I'm either married or if I'm in civil partnership, let's say, just for the sake of this example. Obviously not a good example, but and I'm going to say that this is going to be a repetition, which means that I can add some subfields like name and maybe age. And maybe I'll add a document, a file upload function, and well, I have a form. We can preview it. So yes, I do live in Paris. Okay, I haven't. Obviously, I made a mistake here. Let's see. What have I done? Yes, I said and where I want or. I want either married or civil partnership. Let's see what happens now if I refresh that. Now, if I say married or in civil partnership, I can add members of household. If I'm single, then I can't. And then I can add as many members of the household as I want. And I can upload the photo. Okay, so now I see that my form is working. I can go to my beautiful form and I can publish it. Okay, it's going to ask me for more information, so I'm not going to bother with that now. I'm going to just test it. The testing is actually will create a real submission. It's going to be a test submission, which will be reset once the form is published. But this way I can be in a more real example. I'm gonna fill my name. I'm gonna say that I'm gonna fill Paris. I'm gonna add maybe I'm 41, and I'm gonna submit the form. So here, that's it. Now I submitted my form. I can go check on it. So it says that it's in progress. I can see the details I put in here. I can make some changes. For example, I can decide that I do want to add a photo. And now I added some changes. So now it will ask me if I want to submit the changes I made. So I can submit changes all the way while it's staying in progress. And I can also send a message to the administration now that's responsible for my. Okay, so this is for the part of the person who is submitting the form. Now I'm going to switch, because I have all the roles on the platform. So I'm just going to switch to the role where I actually can process the submissions. So I'm going to go here, and this is my beautiful form, and I have one submission. It's right there. It looks good. I have a message. I can answer. I can see a bit of history of what happens. And I can actually accept it for processing. So now the person submitting the form, they can't make any changes anymore. Now it's locked for processing, but now I can spend as much time as I need to decide on the decision. When I made my decision, I can accept, refuse, or I'm gonna be nice here and I'm gonna accept. Okay, now this submission is accepted. I can go back to my user profile where I can see that, yeah, it's accepted now with a reason. This is like the very basic flow. We can go back to the administration part just to have a look at some of the more advanced configuration you can do on the form. There's lots of things here. We can obviously change the forms and
Paul, if I may interrupt, I just wanted to do a time.
Yes.
We have about a couple minutes before we break for.
Yes, I'm pretty much done. I'm just doing like a couple of extras and we're done. I'm just going to change the title. Yeah, actually, it's not published, so it's not going to be very interesting. It's not a big deal. I just wanted to show, so here we can create documents, like I mentioned, where we can insert different tags, so the document will be built out of values in the submission, etc. Yeah, I think I'm going to stop there with the demo, because like there's obviously lots of things to show, but maybe we can go to questions, and if you really want a demo of something else, I can do it, or even, like I said, you can always send me an email and I can do a demo of whatever you want to see in detail.
Thank you so much, Paul. Thank you for the demo. We actually have questions in the chat, and I can read them off to you. The first question is from Tara Schendel. I hope I said that right. Why did France go this route versus licensing a form builder?
Well, some people did try to license a form builder. For example, Minister of Culture, they did license a form builder at first before using us. And it costed them a lot of money with a very uncertain results. I think it's one of the things that you really need to keep in mind, that, like I said early in my presentation, is that France is particularly strict about sovereignty. We can't make business with, the French government can't make business with any company which have any legal tie, which registered anywhere outside of Europe. So already we're limited to only European vendors, which is like, there are some, but like it's not obvious. And on the other hand, like I said, as the project was started in incubator, so it was a very much it wasn't an order from the government, let's build that. It was one person in the government who said, let's try to do that. And we tried it, and it had enough success and enough traction that it became bigger. So it's a very organic story. It's not a story of government and deciding to build that. It's a story of people trying to build something and proving that it works. And we end up having a lot of support from people actually using it.
Very good. Tara, did that answer? I hope it answered your question. So I'm going to read the second question. It says from Annie Crabtree. The question is, I'm interested to know if you've done user research, user testing with people who use this.
We do some. The thing is that, like I said, we have lots of very different forms with lots of very different demographics. So the user research have to be, like I said, we can have members of public, we can have NGOs, we can have companies. They all have very different approaches to what they expect, and they will have very different profiles. We did on some of them, like for example, right now, like I mentioned, we working on enable someone filling the form to say that they're doing it for someone else. This is something we actually we talked with people designers who did user research in those, like I said, Maison France Service, so those centers to help people. So we talked with people on the ground on that. And the last thing I said, all of us are doing customer support. Mm-hmm. This is another way for us to do user research. It's actually an opportunity. So we even developers, we spend at least a day a week to trying to talk to people, and we ask them if they have a problem. We ask them to make us a demo and try to understand what the problem is.
Very good, thank you. When you were doing a demo, Bethany Seeger made a comment. She said that's a nice setup for condition logic. So, if that
yes. Thank you. It's quite simple. We really try to stay like one of the things that really was important to us is to not go overboard. We looked at several implementations in different tools, and like I said, how we always have to keep this balance between more power users and people who are not very experienced with such tools. And we try to keep it simple for now. And but we're trying to improve it. Like we adding new features as we see that there are use cases. Like one of the main thing for us is try to not add anything that we don't have a compelling case for who's going to use it and for what. For example, in the conditional logic, we're really restricted to what you can condition on. So right now it's only on finite select lists, on checkboxes, and on numbers. But for example, we didn't try to do something very complicated based on like arbitrary text, because we thought that it seemed like, I know some tools do that, and we were like, it's very hard to see the use case. And even if some very advanced people might do something clever with that, most people are just going to be very lost. So it's, yeah.
Thank you. All right. So Annie asked a follow-up question. So I'm going to read all of Annie's questions. So here it says, also, if you're developing any kind of pattern library or design system, for example, for combinations of questions that get used a lot. And
excellent.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, excellent question. It's something that we have in mind. Like I mentioned, we have this problem of dealing with quality of forms. And obviously having a library of components would be very helpful with that. It's on the roadmap. I just gonna go back a bit, like I said, we are, I don't know how to you, it seems like having we're about 15 people team. I think it's like, to us, it doesn't sound that big. We have a lot of work, and we basically have to make very, very hard decisions on where we focus on. Yeah, the idea of reusable components is definitely floating around, but it's a lot of work, and we need to figure out where to start. And are we building sort of an app store right away? Are we trying to just scope it to simple configuration files, and only very power user will be able to create those components? Are we creating components just ourselves? are we letting anyone create components? But if anyone can create components, how we ensure the quality? Then we're back to the problem of someone have to do the, well, basically someone have to do quality assurance on the created components. So yeah, there's lots of questions there.
Okay, I want to read a comment from Nancy Mandojano. I hope I said that right. She said, "Thank you for making yourself accessible, Paul." So thank you for that. And then I have another question from Tara. I don't know if you addressed this, but it says, how do you gather the data on the back end for processing and trend analysis?
So we use a tool called Metabase. I don't know if any of you is familiar with, but it's a data analysis tool, which is basically we plug on our database, we run it on our own infrastructure, and some of our like people who, like for example, the person who works on strategy, they use this quite a bit to extract data from the platform and to use in conversation with stakeholders. Yeah.
Okay. I wanted to remind everyone that all these questions will be sent to Paul. And so if we don't get to all of them here, Paul will have to do it. Yeah.
Just want to add something about statistics. We do expose some statistics. And where we do that, we actually do it. So each form have actually a statistics page where we show, for example, times of processing, etc. It's all public for all forms. This was a quite controversial decision. Some people in administrations were not particularly happy about the fact that we made available to everyone the times of like treatment, time of processing for forms. But we also had quite a bit of support on the other hand. So for now, we're staying with that and we're really happy that we did it.
Yeah, everyone's measuring data makes everyone a little more accountable.
Yes.
Some more than others. So a question from Christine Mulcrone. Do you provide users with any kind of best practices for building a form resource? And are there any common pain points for users?
So we do have documentation, which our team of people who like outreach people who maintain it. And we do weekly online seminar, maybe not weekly, but quite regular monthly seminars. Usually it's about usually they gather, it's in hundreds of people. So it's actually quite like popular seminars where so our outreach people make demos. They show best practice that we think can be applied. So it's like a teaching moment. And to onboard new users or even more experienced users, try to teach them some tricks. I also like show them new features because we, like I said, we ship a lot. Like we're quite agile and we have always like it's another, like I didn't mention it in other challenges, but one of the things we're trying to tackle this year is that we realize sometimes we develop something new and actually people don't realize it's there. Mm-hmm. So clearly we have a better job to do on that. And we're also like trying to add this to the platform, the ability to push notifications to the people on the form builder side to say, hey, now you can do that on top of what you're already doing.
Wonderful. A related question from Patty. Roughly what percentage of forms would you say have now been digitized with this tool?
I don't have a percentage number. Like I said, I have the number, which is like 30,000 is what's published right now. It's not even necessarily, 30,000, it's forms that are published and have, I think, at least 5 submissions or something like that. So it's quite vague. What I can tell you is like going back to the broom wagon, our target is still like, we do have a few, like in success stories, I mentioned some really, really big, some big forms, but like our main target is really, really small ones. And those ones it's a long trail. Like we have new forms coming in every week. They constantly added. They also regularly disappear. So this is another thing, is like, you understand, like lots of forms are very ephemeral.
Yeah.
They come and go. So it's like, and yeah, but we don't, like, if just last thing about that, for example, you're not going to find on our platform any of the like very big, like institutional, like, for example, I don't know, like request for a new passport or anything related to healthcare. Like all that is dealt by specialized IT. We're really like much more on the side of like trying to help those without dedicated IT departments.
So Paul, this question is from me. So the back end for the data, it's in the platform, but the local people have access to it. Whoever created the user has access to it, and can also, delete it or whatever they want to do with it, right?
So the person who submitted the form, they can ask to, they can't, I mean, once the form is in the system, no, they can't delete. This is quite interesting, but it has to do with French law, administrative law. In France, once you submitted your file to administration, administration owns the file. This is a rule. And you can obviously go challenge, and in some cases they will delete. You can go ask them to delete it, etc. I'm not saying like it's mutable, but it's not something you can just do with the press of the button, because administration, once they started processing it, basically they consider that it's in their process. You need to basically go and tell them that you want to stop whatever you started.
Right, right.
So today our system is that you can, the user can delete anything before it was started processing. Once it started processing, it will be deleted. The user can say, I'm not interested in it anymore, and we're just going to remove it from the interface, but the administration will keep access to it. The user can even remove the account. We're going to detach the files, but administration will still keep the file, and they won't be able to contact the user anymore. This is like the rule. But every form have, like I said, data retention policy, which is usually between 6 months and a year, and sometimes we try to encourage to be even less. And by the end of this date, everything will be deleted from the platform.
So this is more for like small use, ad hoc use, as needed use, right? So what are some of the example forms that are submitted? Just curious.
I show you some in this, for example, the Ministry of Culture. It can be anything. It can be organizing a festival. It can be asking for some money for some event to the government. It can be participating in some it can be a lot of things. But there are also cases of like, for example, like they're more like stuff like, for example, we have like some people using it for regulation of hunting seasons.
Oh, I see.
So they're going to submit like, oh, how many whatever animal you can shoot this year, and you have to declare all that. So they're going to do this through our forms. It can also be something related to putting your child into some extra school activities. So it can be a lot of things. Yeah.
Okay. So I have 2 more questions, and then we have about 6 minutes to go. I'm going to read a question from Lauren, and then I'll do a follow-up question from Annie. So this question is from Lauren Kemperman. Is your group managing the infrastructure for the platform? Is this a multi-tenant setup?
So yes, we do manage our infrastructure. We, again, like I said, so France now made special arrangements, and our infrastructure have to be on a special plan with only certain government approved hosting companies. So we deal with everything. So everything is hosted ourselves. It's multi-tenant. I guess it depends what you mean by multi-tenant. So it is multi-tenant in the sense that all the forms on our platform are on the same infrastructure. In this sense, yes. But I mentioned also earlier that there are several other instances. This means separate infrastructure. For example, health ministry, they decided to run their own copy of our software because they have their own operated servers which are qualified for health data, which we are not, for example. So we're going to refuse. If you come to us to be like, oh, I want to declare some health-related stuff, we're going to say, no, you can't do that on our platform, because we're not, like, it's for now, it's too much work for us to be qualified for that.
Yeah.
So some part of administration will run their own infrastructure for this. Yes.
Very good. Thank you. And so the follow-up question from Annie Crabtree, earlier she asked about user research, and she just wanted to clarify that she actually meant, do you have any user research activity with French civil servants who use the form builder?
Yes, we do. We even sometimes go work with them. If they're not too far from our office, we try to find people in like nearby offices that uses us, and then we go sit with them and look what they're doing. Yes.
Right.
This is actually usually the preferred form of it. To be fair, like actually finding people in administration is much easier. It's much harder to do user research with actual end users of the form, because, well, unless they are another administration, in which case, like I said, because sometimes it's one administration targeting another administration. In this case, it's a bit easier because you can go and talk to them and be like, can I see what you're doing? But if you're targeting like end users, like members of the public, it can be quite challenging to find people who are willing to spend time with you, like showing you what they're doing. They just want to fill their form and be done with their day, usually.
Right. Very good. There's a couple of comments when you mentioned that by French law, that you can only work with European service providers. And so people were like, wow, this is so different from the US. And
the thing is, the reason for that is, like, I don't know if you're all aware of what Cloud Act is. Cloud Act means that the US government can subpoena any data, even outside of US, as long as it's operated by a company registered in US. So from France's perspective, for example, Amazon just announced European sovereign platform. From France's perspective, it's not sovereign, because even if it's completely hosted in Europe, even if all the people working on it are, like Amazon said, European citizens, it still have a legal tie to Amazon, which is registered in US, which means that US government have the right to ask them for data. This is your law, which basically makes the rest of the world inapt to use any American produced. I mean, some people actually go as far as saying that they do, like some jurists in France, but this is quite extreme position. There is like disagreement on that. Extreme position to say that even any software written in the US shouldn't be used. I think it's quite extreme, but.
US government law, Cloud Act is what you're talking about.
Yes, Cloud Act, yes.
Okay. All right. Is there any other question that I didn't read? Let's see. Oh, Annie was saying, so you can't use things like AWS.
No, absolutely not. Yes. No, absolutely
Goodness. Not. Pretty
we are actually very surprised that UK government is using AWS, because you have the same problem. It means that American government owns all of your citizen data, which is quite surprising to me.
Yes. So we have 1 minute left. Let's see. Chanel, you want to go ahead and read the question? It's hard for me to open the message you just sent. I think for those of you who have remaining questions for Paul, if we can repost Paul's introduction and email address on the chat. Paul, the people are thankful. There's so much. And great, thank you. Let's see, you can read the comments, I think. Makes sense. This has been amazing for me. I'm learning a lot. Paul, do you have questions?
I reposted my email. Please, anyone who have any questions, shoot me an email and we can like either questions email, or if you want to do a chat later, like we'll be very happy to.
I'm going to ask
my question.
Do you have a question for the audience? Yes.
I'd like to hear from anyone doing anything similar, or anyone interested in like any, I don't know, open source collaborations, who knows? Please reach out. Be very happy to talk to you.
Okay, wonderful. You can, are you joining the networking session after this, Paul?
I'll try to, yes, sure.
Try to, okay.
I'm not sure how it works, but I'll have a look. I'll be around. I'll try to stay around.
Thank you. On the left side, there'll be a networking button, but let me read off some of the final things. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Paul, for joining us for today's session. And a special thank you again, Paul, chiming in from Paris, France, for sharing your time and expertise. A reminder.